Okay. So a couple things I want to look at first. We'll get to the video next, and we'll do the quizzes. And you guys can see my screen, right? You can see the evidence here. Okay. So this handout that I found, one reason that I was excited about it was because it actually uses one of the prompts that we wrote about the other day. So you remember the cell phones and the Safer Kids Summit, and so there's this. It just has the one passage, but it's talking about how tweens deserve cell phones, right? So, and that was actually the one that I had chosen to support in my writing. But what I really want to focus on, but because we're familiar with that, I thought it would be helpful just to review, what evidence is. What is the basic elements in evidence? What are we looking for? And just kind of redefine or get a little refresher here. So the handout here, I've already put this on Google Classroom, so it'll be available later. You guys can look at it. It's real simple. It's good stuff. And it's like a whole, instructional plan and everything. But first off, right, when we talk about evidence, what is evidence? What are we looking for? What do we mean by evidence? So here's our explanation. So all this falls under evidence. Factual, right? So truthful statements that cannot be denied, statements that the average person may know or which can be proven. So the sky is blue, right? That's a fact. Germany lost World War II. That's a fact. They are verifiable. If there's something that somebody states that maybe you're not familiar with, we all have missing information. We don't know everything, but it's easy to prove, right? It's something that you can research, you can look up, you can Google, whatever it may be. It is a factual statement. Statistics and data, right? The other side, numerical facts. They're always presented typically in numerical ways. Raw numbers, percentages, fractions. It's usually, this percentage of these people, did this. Also verifiable. And it's typically with statistics, it's when it gets to percentages and fractions, you've done some calculations. The deaths in the Civil War or World War I, that's also a statistic. But that's, lends itself more to just being factual, right? When you get into statistics and data, sometimes that can be manipulated or used in ways that is not, is irrelevant to the whatever claims are being made. So that's something to keep in mind. But again, it's stuff that is numerical. It's typically also verifiable. Examples are anecdotes, right? So this is also evidence, but I've mentioned this, right? It typically only deals with one scenario or one situation. So real life situations, events, or experiences that illustrate a position, anecdotal stories that help explain an author's claim. And they're fine. You can use anecdotes, you can use examples, but it is not necessarily enough information. Yeah, you can point out that you had a certain type of experience, but that does not speak for everyone. And you can't assert that, but you can use them. And they can also help sort of explain, particularly if you have other facts and data to go along with that, a personal experience or somebody that you know that went through something similar. Expert testimony. So probably generally speaking, now they have this kind of in a hierarchy, but here I would say expert testimony probably is a little more reliable than an anecdote. So, they have observations or conclusions of someone who is considered highly knowledgeable. And because he or she is an expert in a particular field of study or occupation, someone who has firsthand knowledge and experience. Okay, so if what you're, if you're reading a passage, and we've encountered this almost everything that we've read, particularly when it comes to like the stuff with kids and cell phones or kids on the internet, things like that. They'll have like a psychologist who's done some research or something, and they speak to that. Strong, right? Particularly when you have an expert that deals with that. If you wanted to ask, I'm not an expert, but when it comes to history, that's my field. Probably better to come to me with a history question than Rachel. It's going to be better to go to Rachel with a math question, right? So that's how experts work, right? Logical reasoning. So here's what we're going to deal with a lot today is those faults in reasoning and different types of these logical fallacies and faulty reasoning. So an explanation which draws conclusions that the reader can understand, a discussion which helps the reader understand or make sense out of facts or examples offered, right? So it's reasoning through something similar to an anecdote where you're telling a story, but here it's more maybe of an analogy. But it has to be sound reasoning. And then finally, the last type of evidence here, and we've talked about all of these, is an emotional appeal, right? So use of sympathy, fear, loyalty, whatever it may be, anger, to persuade, and manipulate the reader's emotions. Alone, that's a bad idea, right? And we'll see that like the one passage where the lady was saying, you don't want to give your kids a cell phone because they'll be bullied. Or do you want your child to become the bully, right? So that there's an emotional appeal there. They're usable when you have other evidence. So if you were kind of using that as a conclusion, you were writing your way out of the passage, and sort of leaving the readers with something to think about, right? We've talked about this. That's one way to do it. An emotional appeal is good. Give them something to think about. But you'd want to have other evidence, facts and data before you make an emotional appeal, and you would not want that to just stand alone. Okay, so that's the idea there. So here in this worksheet, we're just going to drop down to the bottom because they have filled in. Now, I mentioned this was the one woman who had written, she was pro cell phone. And you remember, she talked about things like 60% of children ages 8 to 12 already have one. And I kind of mentioned that's a bandwagon. If that was to stand alone, it's a statistic, right? It's a good statistic, but it doesn't necessarily support her claim that all kids should have cell phones, or you should consider giving your child at the age of 10 a cell phone just because other children have them. And then so you remember reading through these. There are some other points in there. So just a second, I saw Nilda come in and then she disappeared. Okay. And then, psychologists, that would be a, well, like we said before, an ethical appeal, but that's expertise, right? That's an expert in the field. What I want to show you here, now this is in the next table, we actually have this filled out where they use examples from that passage and show you directly which type of evidence that is. So factual information, right? Truthful statements that cannot be denied. Cell phone usage among tweens has grown rapidly. That is something that you could verify. That's a statement that is not, it doesn't lack logic or reasoning. It's pretty general statement, right? But you can obviously assert that, and it's factual. Statistical information, right? New numbers, they offer that the survey found that 60% of children ages 8 to 12 already have cell phones, right? Which we've already talked about. You see numbers, that's typically going to be statistical, fractions, percentages, what have you. It's fine as evidence goes, but remember, how they use it is also relevant. Examples are anecdotes, right? So those real life situations, or creating a scenario. So they use the example there. Picture the following. You told your fourth grader that you would pick her up after school, but you are stuck in traffic. So it's anecdotal. Weak on its own, but useful if you're helping to explain something. That was a little bit of an emotional appeal too. You could see that, right? Sort of, there's an idea there of sort of evoking fear, right? That your daughter, your child, is going to be out there on the playground, left alone. So there's a little bit of a twofold there. But the use of anecdotes will often do that. They can also appeal to emotion. Expert testimony, right? Here we go again. When you have experts, so they're citing psychologists, tell us that the period between ages 10 and 12 is a time to teach children about responsibility and to give them opportunities to earn our trust. So there is an expert testimony. That's something that you could point out that they use that. Psychologists, we had several. It seems like it's always psychologists in these expert testimonies that we come across. Some of that's because of the types of readings that we've seen. But there, you see that when they, particularly if they mention the profession of the person and they offer a quote from them, a lot of times. This one was a little different because it's just sort of more general, talking about psychologists. But a lot of times they'll talk about a specific professor or a specific researcher, and they will quote them. That's all expert testimony. Logical reasoning. So here we go again, right? So an explanation that draws conclusions that the reader can understand, but it has to be logical, right? It has to use the correct sort of pathway for that. And that's what we'll deal with for the rest of the class. So their example there, right? Providing a 10-year-old with a cell phone offers an ideal way to achieve these goals. So, talking about earlier independence, safety, things like that. So reasoning through that, right, by, if you're concerned about your child's safety, if you're concerned about your child's independence and wanting them to make, develop their independence, then giving them a cell phone will help with that, right? So there's a logical statement. That's logical reasoning. And then finally, the emotional appeal, right? So here they use providing a 10-year-old with a cell phone gives parents peace of mind. So here the emotional appeal is reducing stress, right? Reducing anxiety, but that's still an emotional appeal. So there's those types of evidence to continue to look for. And like I said, I put that up on Google Classroom, so you can review that. I think that's these are really good, straightforward explanations of each one. And that's what you should be looking for in your extended response. So when we work through that tomorrow, those are the ones, a kind of checklist that you want to think about when you come across claims in writing. Okay, so let's switch gears, and we're going to talk about logical fallacies, and it's basically the same thing as faulty reasoning. So got about a 7-minute video here, more explanations on those ones that are commonly seen. Some of these will certainly be more relevant. Some of them we're probably not going to see too much, but it is a possibility. So let's take a look here. And so all of you can see the video, right? And more importantly, please let me know if you cannot hear the video.
Hey guys, welcome to this video on logical fallacies. When creating a logical argument, there are many different aspects that have to come together to ensure that your argument is sound and does not contain any flaws. One of these aspects is avoiding what we call logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is an error of reasoning that will weaken your argument and, in most cases, undermine it completely. Today, we're going to look at the 10 most common logical fallacies. Circular reasoning. Circular reasoning or circular argument is when the argument is restated rather than proven. In other words, instead of explaining why something is or isn't true, you just fall back on the original argument as proof. Here's an example. Opium is sleep-inducing because it has a sleep-inducing quality. You haven't really explained why opium is sleep-inducing, you've just confirmed that it is in fact sleep-inducing. A typical formula for circular reasoning is A is true because B is true, and B is true because A is true. Another example of this would be, the wind is invisible because I can't see it, and I can't see it because it's invisible. When constructing an argument, make sure to avoid this kind of logic by being as specific as possible about your proofs. Hasty generalization.
So just to stop there and fill that in a little bit, remember, a lot of times it might be covered up a little bit because they use a different term for the same thing, right? So that was the thing that you want to, if they're making a statement like that, like opium is sleep inducing because it makes you drowsy. Right. So that's the same. That's still that circular reasoning, but they inserted some different words. That's how you're usually going to see it. It's not going to be so obvious. It could be, but most of the time it probably won't be so obvious where they're basically saying, this is right because it's right, or, this is wrong because it's wrong. They will, manipulate it some by using other words. So just keep that in mind. If you see other word choices, see if it's still the same definition. That's circular reasoning.
A hasty generalization is when someone makes a sweeping statement without considering all of the facts. For example, if a man walks through a town for the first time and sees 10 people, all of them children, he might conclude that all the town's residents are children. This argument fails to explore all of the data surrounding the topic and attempts to suggest a conclusion based on this limited knowledge. This is also known as overgeneralization and is best avoided by exploring and presenting every aspect of an argument's topic. Slippery slope.
So overgeneralization, hasty generalization, a lot of times that'll be stereotypes. We talked about those. So it's possible that you will see that. More likely to see circular logic when it comes to your passages. There may be hasty generalizations made where they're pointing out the other thing to look for, right, with generalizations, if they're using those absolute terms, if they're qualifying their statements with things like all, never, ever, right, absolute terms, look for those. And that's, we're always questioning what we're reading, and that should be one of those things that you question. Can you really say, all people over 70 are bad drivers? Stuff like that, which is also a stereotype of older drivers. So look for those terms.
Slippery slope is a conclusion based on the premise that one small step will lead to a chain of events resulting in some significant event, which is usually negative. In other words, if we allow A to happen, then an unwanted Z will eventually happen, which means that A should not happen. Here's an example. If you don't study on Saturdays, your grades will suffer. If your grades suffer, you won't graduate school with high honors, which means you won't get a good job. Since you won't have a good job, you'll have to live on the streets. This implies that not studying on Saturdays will result in eventually being homeless. The problem here is that the main issue is being covered by extreme hypotheticals with no real proof to support the argument. Straw man. A straw man argument is a technique where someone distorts an opponent's claim so that it's easier to refute, or where someone tries to refute a point someone made by giving a rebuttal to a point they did not make. For example, if someone said schools should be more lenient with standardized testing, a strawman reply to this would be, if we stop giving tests in schools, we are going to raise an ignorant generation that won't have the skills to live in the real world. This fallacy serves to undermine an honest and rational debate with unfounded claims. Ad hominem. So
that was one that we talked about a little bit last week. And Yeah, so you have to be careful to see, okay, if somebody is making a claim, are they addressing the problem? And is it, logical? And they're a little bit like slippery slope, right? So if we give all our 10-year-olds cell phones, they're all going to become bullies, right? So there's a bit of a slippery slope idea in there, but also it could be seen as a straw man. But it's basically when just like she said, it's manipulating the argument. So you're answering the question you want to answer or rebuttal rather than directly addressing the claim or the argument. So, and a lot of times it's bombastic. It's making a greater claim about the argument.
Ad hominem is an attack on a person's character or personal attributes in order to discredit their argument. For example, a mother might reject the judgments of a male pediatrician because he has never been a mother and couldn't possibly understand the child's situation. She has done nothing to directly oppose the doctor's argument, but has instead tried to undermine his judgment without actually having to engage with it. False dichotomy. A false dichotomy.
Ad hominem gets a little tricky. It's something you have to be careful with, but so you could see where that would come into play with the expert appeals to ethics, as far as using an expert idea. That can become a problem because they may not actually be an expert. So, with the COVID pandemic, there was all these videos online about these people, who, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and made claims about, the effectiveness of the vaccine, or it was going to kill all of us and things like that. They weren't experts. Some of them, may have been, a doctor. They didn't necessarily work in immunology or virology or pharmaceuticals, or sometimes they were like pharmaceutical sales reps, or worked on that side of pharmaceuticals. But you throw up, especially with those types of videos, that's what YouTube's great for, right? So and so worked in this kind of general field of pharmacology for 20 years, but then you find out it's like, okay, well, they didn't do anything specifically with this type of technology or this type of medication, so that doesn't make them an expert, which is a little different than ad hominem, where you just attack the character of the person regardless if they're an expert or not, right? So even if, just that's a perfect example there. He is a doctor, he's a pediatrician, so he treats boys and girls. He's done that his entire life. But, attacking him just because he's a man treating a girl, that's a problem, right? That's not relevant. He's still an expert. Sometimes, the other types of character attacks, the person might be a phenomenal psychologist in their respective field and have all this ton of research, but they may have also had a sordid past, or they may have a problem with addiction or something, and saying it's like, well, you're just a drug addict. That's an ad hominem attack, but it does not serve, it doesn't refute what they're saying at that time as an expert.
Or false dilemma occurs when an argument presents 2 points while disregarding or ignoring others in order to narrow the argument in one person's favor. This is also known as either-or fallacy. Here are a couple of examples. You were either for us or against us. I thought you were a good person, but you didn't donate to the charity last year. There are only 2 options given when there are really more options available. This attempts to drive the argument in a direction where only one specific answer can be given in order to incriminate the opposing party. Appeal to emotion. An appeal to emotion is when a writer or speaker uses emotion-based language to try to persuade the reader or listener of a certain belief or position. An appeal to emotion generally follows the logical form: X is true. Think of how sad you'll be if it's not true. Or think of how happy you'll be if it's true. Example: I deserve a second chance to submit my assignment. This past week was so busy for me. I had football practice late every night. I had tons of homework in all my other classes, and my girlfriend and I just broke up. In general, what someone perceives to be unfair, how someone is feeling, or even things that someone might perceive to be moral or immoral do not carry much weight for making an objective argument. Equivocation. A fallacy of equivocation is when an argument...
So, we just saw that appeal to emotion can also be a logical fallacy. It can be used as evidence, but it's the weakest type of evidence. And it's not necessarily a logical fallacy sometimes if you have other things to support it. If you're, making a statement about something, but standing alone, no go. It is not a good way to present an argument just by making an emotional appeal. You have to have other information there.
Is presented in an ambiguous, double-sided way, making the argument misleading. This is also known as a double-speak fallacy. Here's an example. Hot dogs are better than nothing. Nothing is better than hamburgers. Therefore, hot dogs are better than hamburgers. The word nothing in this case is used to refer to both not anything and all things. It's important to precisely define your words and be consistent with their usage. Bandwagon Appeal. A bandwagon appeal is an appeal that presents the thoughts of a group of people in order to persuade someone to think the same way. It argues that one must accept or reject an argument based on peer pressure. Here are two examples. Many people buy extended warranties. Therefore, it is wise to buy them. My family holds this as truth. Therefore, everyone who disagrees is simply wrong. These are not strong arguments because they have no basis in fact. False analogy. A false analogy, also known as a weak analogy, is when two things that are unalike are being compared based on a trivial similarity in order to prove a point. For example, people are like dogs. They respond best to discipline. This is an absurd analogy that attempts to correlate people and dogs based on one minor similarity. I hope that this video was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to our channel for further videos. See you guys next time.
So of course, we'll see some of those more than others, right? Bandwagon appeal, appeals to emotion, circular logic, possibility. So, false dichotomy you might see. It's probably unlikely that you'll see a lot of those. But certainly the ones that we've kind of hammered on here as far as emotional appeal, false analogies is a possibility. And then there's also that sort of irrelevant evidence where they can throw something at you that's not necessarily relevant. It looks good, it might be a statistic, but does it really speak to the argument that they're making and the claim that they're making? So so I got some quizzes here. So as you see, there's not long passages. They're just one individual question. I'm hoping it's not timed because it's got a little timer on each side there. So when I click on them, hopefully we'll get at least some time to read the question and answer. I have not gone through these, so we'll just see how the answers go and see if there's any additional suggestions that they offer when we answer them. So we're going to start with Grace for number 1 here. Would you read that and answer it for us?
Okay. I guess I should buy my I guess I should buy my 12-year-old daughter an iPhone. Everyone at her new school has one, and I want her to fit in with the other kids. A. Appeal to force authority. B. Bandwagon. C. Either or. And D. Slippery slope. C.
Bandwagon. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's see here. Oh, here we go. Okay, that's a little different. All right, so I guess it's all right, same thing. Oh, it's just gonna have us show the answers, it looks like here. So we will show, oh, here we go. Yeah, so bandwagon, right? Okay, I don't think it's time. So, and now that we're in it, I think that's the way it'll work here. Yeah, so remember, the other way to look at bandwagon appeal is if your mother ever told you, if everyone jumps off a bridge, are you going to do it too? Right? This bandwagon ideas. We, growing up, it's like, oh, mom, all my friends have these Nikes or whatever. There's a bandwagon element to that. So particularly when you say something like, every kid has this or that, bandwagon appeal. Let's see, Christiana, you want to try this one? Oh, wait, no. I got to hide answers. Okay. All right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read that one. We'll answer it. I see now. I'll have to hide the answer before I move to the next slide. So it said, my opponent raises a good point, but can we really trust him? I mean, he moved to this town only 2 years ago, and everyone knows that his wife left him. So that was an ad hominem attack, right? So they assert that this person makes good points, but their argument is whether or not you could trust him is that he just only recently moved the town and his wife left him, right? Talking about character, talking about their history or what have you. Does that really talk about, does that have really anything to do with the points that he's making? No. So that's an ad hominem attack. Sorry about that. Okay. I'll hide the answers. Should move over to the next one here. All right, Christiana, back to you again. Try this one.
Okay. What would you know about? Is it the hasty generalization?
I think it's going to be an ad hominem attack again. Let's see. Yeah, so ad hominem. So what the point is making there is, right, so this person's like, oh, what would you know about labor laws? You don't even have a job. Well, that person might be studying law, right? They might be studying labor law. They might have, studied labor in, history or something like that. So that's an attack on their character. And it's not necessarily related to the idea, right? So, it's ad hominem. I'm attacking the character of the person, not necessarily what they know, not necessarily their experience, not necessarily their expertise. All right, so hide. And our next question, Sasha Gay, you want to try that one?
If I don't take this AP class, then I won't do well on the exam. If I don't do well on the AP exam, then I can't get into a good college. If I can't get into a good college, then I'll never get a good job. If I can't get a good job, then I'm going to have to live in my parents' basement forever. Yes, I'll sign up for the AP class. Is it slippery slope?
I believe it's slippery slope. Let's see what it says here. Yeah, so slippery slope, right? And you could tell too, because there's this progression, right? So a lot of times that you might see that kind of idea. If I don't do this, then this will happen, and then this will happen, and then this will happen, right? So just like a slope, this cascading of events. And another way to look at it, right? Eliminate everything in between. So you start with one. If I don't take this AP class, then I won't do well on the exam. And then look at the very last one. If I can't get a good job, then I'm going to have to live in my parents' basement forever, right? You see this huge jump between the two. So that's another way to identify slippery slope, right? Is these huge sort of drops between one idea to the last. All right, so hide. All right, now I got this figured out. So go to Grace. Grace, what's this deal?
I know the professor saw the bridges of Madison County was smarmy trash and lacked any artistic worth, but I still think he's wrong. After all, it was on the bestseller list for over 100 weeks. I know the professor solid. Hey. I know the professor said the bridges of Madison County was smelly trash. Oh, okay. Hey.
So I think it's Bandwagon Argument. Let me see.
Okay.
I'm not real sure about this one either. Okay, yeah. So the idea there is that it was on the bestseller list for over 100 weeks. So the bandwagon point of that is that it was really popular, right? So it sold a bunch of copies. So that in turn must mean that it's good, right? So if everybody liked it, it must have artistic worth. So that's the bandwagon idea there. So the other thing there, it talks about like a red herring. That's sort of like a distracting people from the main point. But yeah, so it's basically, same thing. You think about popular movies. Maybe you're deciding to go to see a movie one weekend. And so let's say it's been out for 2 or 3 weeks, and you're thinking, well, I wonder if this is any good. And so you look and it's like, oh, wow, it did 200 million in the box office in the first week. That gives you an impression that it must be really good because a bunch of people went out to see it. But that necessarily, doesn't mean that it could be complete garbage, right? It's just the fact that people went out to see it doesn't mean necessarily that's any good. That's that bandwagon idea. Everybody's doing it, so I should do it too. All right. And next one, Christiana. What do we think of ad hominem attacks?
Oh. Against light an attack on business and agree. Is it the last one?
Yes, right. So it's an attack on the person, not the argument. Ad hominem is Latin for to the person. So you're directing your rebuttal towards the person that made it, not the quality of their argument or their evidence or their expertise, but the person. All right. So that should be, yeah. So ad hominem attack is an attack on the person. That is something that you might find in your passages if they are mentioned, so this politician or this mayor said this, but we can't trust him because he's whatever. He drives a Chevy, whatever it is. That's attack on the person, not on their argument or their ideas. Oh, I did it again. No, don't look. Okay. Jeez. Okay, well, I'll answer this one. So if I let you go to the bathroom pretty soon, everybody will want to go to the bathroom. This is an example of slippery slope, right? If I let one person do something, everybody will want to do it. So that idea, again, just this going from one thing to another, it's a slippery slope. So hide the answers. Okay. Sasha Gay, let's try this again.
Good morning. Have you gotten over the grouchy mood you were in?
That one might be a little tricky.
Is it a loaded question?
I think it might be. Let's see. Yeah, it's a loaded question. That's kind of an interesting one. Other types of loaded questions, put you in a position. I think a better example of a loaded question is it puts you in a position where you have to answer something controversial, or it opens up, like, you ever heard the term opening up a can of worms?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it might be a little bit off topic, and what it does is it is opening up the argument to all kinds of other scenarios and things like that. So you might hear that from time to time. It's like, that's a loaded question. It may be relevant, but you're putting a lot of pressure on whoever you're asking that statement or whoever you're asking that question to answer something that maybe put them in a bad position. All right. So, Grace.
Right answer.
I got it. All right, Grace, you want to try that one?
Okay. The mind is like a knife cutting through difficult problems, but just as too much cutting dulls a knife, so too much education dulls the mind. Mm. Secular.
So I think it's probably a false analogy. Let's take a look. Oh, there's a little exclamation button here. Let's see if they actually. No, it's not working. Okay, so right, so they're an analogy, like we said, is comparing something to something else. It's sort of like a metaphor or a simile, but it's so there. The analogy is the mind is like a knife. And then but the false analogy is, right, so the mind is like a knife cutting through difficult problems. Okay, that's a decent analogy, but what they're saying, what makes it false is it says, just as too much cutting dulls a knife, so too much education dulls the mind. So the false analogy is if I using my kitchen knife every day, right? I'm dicing peppers and onions and doing all the stuff with it. Eventually it gets dull. But your mind works the opposite, right? The more you use your mind, the sharper it gets. So there's that false analogy. Sure, you can make this analogy that the mind is like a knife, cutting through problems, keeping it sharp. But the more you use it, that's the false part of the analogy. The more I use it, the duller it's going to get. That you can't compare knives and minds the same way. All right, so I'll hide the answer. Hopefully that kind of clarifies that, right? And okay, Christiana, give that one a try.
The true cost. I took out. We're not very interested. Think it is very good. Invest. Is it there? The second one.
Ad
Or the
hominem,
third one?
it's the third. It's a hasty
Yeah,
generalization.
hasty generalization.
Let's take a look at the answer real quick. Yeah, so right, is 2 courses enough to judge an entire university, right? So there's an idea of overgeneralizing. So 2 courses I took at UF were not very interesting. I don't think it's a very good university. That's a pretty hasty generalization, right? You're barely dipping your toes in the water there and determining that it's, you know, a bad university based on 2 experiences. So yeah, making a hasty generalization. All right. And oh, okay, good. I covered him up again. Let's see, Sasha Gay, you want to try that one?
A driver with a New York license plate cuts you off in traffic. You decide that all New York drivers are terrible drivers. Stereotyping.
That should be stereotyping. It's kind of interesting that they put hasty generalization and stereotyping in there because stereotyping is pretty much a hasty generalization. But see, don't care for that question because that's a little bit of a stereotype, right? But I think, you know, you're on the right track there because it is largely the same thing. I think stereotyping, they're probably looking for a little more specific groups of people. You know, not just New York drivers, but that is, yeah, you're on the right track. I would give you credit for that. A hasty generalization, same thing though, right? From one experience, from a simple experience, I draw a conclusion about every, you know, every group of people or every situation based on that one experience. Ohio drivers get a bad rap outside of the state. I don't know if you're aware of this. I grew up in West Virginia, and I grew up my whole life believing that Ohio drivers were bad. And why is that? Because a lot of times, if you're on the interstate driving through West Virginia, you know, people are traveling from Ohio, going on vacation, stuff like that, and there's just this kind of idea. It's like they always drive too slow in the left lane. You know, they hold up traffic and all this stuff. But yeah, so that's a hasty generalization made on, you know, one individual experience or maybe a couple experiences. Okay, and Grace, give that one a try. Ooh, here we go. That's a little different.
What is Logica Fallacy? An argument with the premise in equivocation. See?
Right, an argument that contains mistake in reasoning. Let's make sure our answer is correct. Yeah, so logical fallacy is like we're talking about here. There's something illogical about it, or it lacks reasoning. It doesn't make sense. There's something fishy about it, something that's questionable about it. That's logical fallacy. All right, and Christiana, give that one a try.
Why is this elephant? Elephants are big. Some boys are big, therefore some elephants. The question is really funny. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's not true. So, It's only gives you choice to analyze a problem. This is to two things only separate together. Is it the third one?
Third one, I'm a little curious too. I think that's
The
it.
first
It's
one?
either that or oversimplifies. Let me see. Oh no. See, I was a little concerned about that because it's not necessarily, all elephants are big. So A is true. Some boys are big. Okay, so I guess and B is true. So A plus B must be true. So yeah, so think about those kind of logical statements. If A is true and B is true, A plus B must be true. So just think about the way it's organized. All elephants are big. Some boys are big. Therefore, some boys are elephants. So there's that logical fallacy there. Okay. Yeah, I was a little curious how they were going to go with that. You might run into that, right, where they offer you that faulty reasoning where, this is true and this is true, so this is true. So be careful and look for those as well. Okay. And Grace, give that one a try.
Which logical fallacy will be used in the following advertisement? LeBron James advertising is what? Gatorade.
Yeah, Gatorade.
Oh. False authority. False Delma. False cause. It's only 3.
So
Logical fallacy. Will be used in the following advertisement. I'll go for A.
let's see here. Yeah. So that they were kind of given a different term, but remember we talked about appeals by celebrity, right? So just because a famous person is telling you to do something, you should do it. So that's the same thing. It's just given a different name. So false authority. I can't remember. I think it was appealed to. I'll have to go back and take a look. But remember, we use Miley Cyrus for that because Miley Cyrus doesn't eat gluten. We all shouldn't eat gluten, right? So it's that appeal by celebrity. But I think there was another term I think they used. But yeah, this is great. LeBron James is an athlete. He's out there, so he's used a lot in advertisement. I think he actually does advertise for Gatorade, right? So should you drink Gatorade because LeBron James drinks it? No. You drink it because you like it, or you need the electrolytes or whatever it is. But yeah, so that's a false authority. It's the same idea that we looked at before. All right. And Christiana, give that one a try. Oh, it's a little picture. Hope you guys can see.
Okay. What kind of logic is being used in this image? All cats have 4 legs. I have 4 legs. Therefore, I'm a cat. This is so funny.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay. Yes. Overgeneralization, force, authority, simply slow. Is it? Wait, is it the second one or the last
I think it's going to be overgeneralization. Let's take a look.
one? Yeah.
Now here, this is a little bit confusing because they use that same, if A is true and B is true, A plus B is true, right? So we just saw that before. If all cats have 4 legs, I have 4 legs, therefore I am a cat, right? So, so here, that's again one of those kind of test-taking tips, test-taking skills. Make sure that you're thinking a lot about the choices that they give you. Because you could just as easily have been like, if A is true, B is true. That's what I was looking at. I'm like, well, what would be the next best, guess there? It's like, okay, well, this little dog's making a generalization because all cats have 4 legs, then every animal must have every animal with 4 legs must be a cat. So that's an overgeneralization. It's a good job pointing that out. Yeah, these are pretty good. We got Marilyn Monroe. I don't know if you guys can see that well. I'll read it. So Sasha Gay, this one's going to be for you, and it says, Marilyn Monroe says, yes, I use Luster Cream shampoo. So that must be an old advertisement from the 50s or 60s. So Marilyn Monroe uses Luster Cream shampoo. Sasha Gay, what type of fallacy is this?
False authority.
False authority, right? So just like LeBron James drinking Gatorade, now of course it's we're always going to see celebrities endorsing things, but obviously that doesn't make him an expert. That just means that there's somebody that uses that product. Same way, just because Miley Cyrus doesn't eat gluten doesn't mean that I shouldn't eat gluten. The thing today about celebrities that really gets me, a lot of people will point out, they express their political opinions quite a bit. And of course, they're free to do that. We are a free country, under the First Amendment, you have that freedom of speech, and everybody gets up in arms because, so-and-so said this about the president, or so-and-so said that about the president. What do they know? They're a celebrity. That's like, yeah. Why do you get mad about that? So many people get upset because somebody says something about somebody else. It's like, but why do you let that bother you? So yeah, it's they have a right to say it, obviously. Some are a little more in tune with what's going on than others. So some of them might be a little more reliable than others, but that necessarily doesn't mean that you should follow their opinion. And that goes for, whatever they say, whoever it is. So, that's the other kind of irony about that. I see this a lot, because this celebrity says something about, this politician. What do they know? They're a celebrity. And that same person will turn around and support, celebrity B because they said something different about that same person. But they're still a celebrity. So, you're kind of being wishy-washy there. All right. So yeah, so that's a false authority. Just because Marilyn Monroe uses Luster Cream shampoo, maybe, that doesn't mean you should use it as well. Okay. All right. Grace, you give that one a try.
Okay. That drink everybody knows. Type of appeal to tradition.
Probably Bandwagon. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. So again, the drink everybody knows. A little less straightforward than it's like everybody drinks this, but still there's a bandwagon kind of idea there. It's like, oh yeah, everybody knows Coca-Cola, so you should drink Coca-Cola. All right. Christiana. Ooh, that one's tough to read. So this says just like grandma used to make. I'm having trouble. I can't really. It's weird. It won't let me zoom in. Let me see if I can change the size here or something. Well, all right. So it says just like grandma used to make. Heirloom recipes. So it's an ad for like probably like a cookbook, I believe, or maybe some type of cooking. Something. Let's see if you can pick that out, Christiana. What kind of fallacy is being used?
Appeal to tradition.
Now, see, I think this is an appeal to tradition. That's another fallacy that we didn't really talk about. But yeah, good job. Right. So the appeal to tradition is sort of like, well, it's always been this way. So it's going to be this way. That's another way to sort of look at an appeal to tradition, or, you know, it's also sort of an emotional appeal if it kind of harkens back to your youth, or, you know, a memory, if it's evoking a memory. But most importantly there, yeah, if it's just, if it's all, you know, you'll hear that sometimes, that sort of logical fallacy where it's like, well, you know, why do we do it this way? It's like, well, because we've always done it this way. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right. That doesn't mean that we should continue to do it that way. That's an appeal to tradition. Okay. Sasha Gay. It's another one. Okay, I'll try to, it's an ad. I can't zoom in to see. Let me see. It says tobacco first. What's next? Start by removing the branding from cigarettes, and where will it end? So that is what it says under that main title there. Sasha Gay. What kind of fallacy is being used there?
Is it slippery slope?
I believe it's going to be slippery slope. Let's see. Yeah, right. So there's another indicator, right? Oh, you know, so I think the idea here, which is really weird. So talking about removing the labeling, the packaging from cigarettes. I think that's the idea there. So you just have like this generic, you know, print where you don't have like a lot of flashy packaging and stuff to make them less appealing. So this is probably an ad from the tobacco company. You know, it's like, oh, you want to remove all the labeling from our cigarettes? Well, what's next? Maybe it'll be, you know, sodas, and then it'll be this, and then it'll be that. So there's another way to identify a slippery slope. Oh, you're going to start here. Well, what comes after that? Slippery slope. Okay. Oh, our little Charmin bears. Grace, what's going on with our Charmin bears here?
Okay.
And I realized something looking at this. You go ahead. No, I understand now. Okay.
Okay. Bandwagon.
So I
Delma.
think it might be false dilemma. Let me see. Yeah. So here, when they say false dilemma, it's that same thing as false dichotomy, where they're offering you one. They're basically saying it's either this or that. right? There's a lot more choices, right? Either way, you can't go wrong. Charmin, vote ultra soft or vote ultra strong. So putting that idea that there's only two choices, right? That I'm only going to use Charmin toilet paper and I'm only going to use ultra soft or ultra strong. Right. So there's a lot of different varieties out there. There's a lot of other choices. There's a lot of other things you could even say about Charmin toilet paper, other than the fact it's ultra soft or ultra strong. So it's a false dichotomy, or in this case, a false dilemma. Same sort of idea, though, right? If you're creating a dilemma for somebody, you're putting them in a situation where they have to make a choice, right? And it's a critical choice. It's a critical idea that they have to focus on. But if it's a false dilemma, it means that there's other choices that you are not presenting them with. So I hope that kind of clarifies a little bit. All right, moving along. Christiana, take a look here.
I don't know how Mr. Thomas can be such a difficult gender on assignment. Difficult reader. He is always late and never prepared. Also, he is always is it the third one?
The ad hominem to the person. Yeah. I believe it is. Let's take a look. Yeah. So, right. So it's saying there, I don't know how Mr. Thomas can be such a difficult grader on our assignments. He's always late for class, never prepared. He's always disheveled. So it's trying to compare. It's like, okay, so he's a sort of disciplinarian when it comes to their grading, right? We think of somebody as a strict grader as being sort of a well-disciplined, very straight, very, put together person if they're going to grade you very strictly. But that doesn't have anything to do with the fact of his appearance or the fact that he's unprepared or the fact that he's disheveled, right? Two different ideas. In this case, it's about a person, so it's ad hominem, right? So good job. Okay, Sasha Gay. What about this one?
Exaggeration.
I'm hoping it's an exaggeration here, right? Let's see. Yeah. So, this is fine for, humor, right? I mean, a lot of times, you're not going to encounter that maybe so much in a passage. You might, as sort of some type of appeal, or this is also sort of hyperbole, right? That's another way you'll hear it described, where you make this kind of over the top claim about something. Here, it's kind of it's humorous. So, in fiction writing and stuff like that, it would be okay. But that's certainly an exaggeration. You would also consider that to be hyperbole when somebody is making those types of a claim. They're using one that's sort of humorous here, but there's other ones you can make where it's like a really exaggerated claim about something. All right, and Grace. This is last. No, got two more. All right.
Okay. People who wear glasses are smarter. Exaggeration?
I think it's probably stereotyping, which is kind of annoy me. Let's see.
Oh.
Yeah. So again, here it's another hasty generalization kind of idea, right? You're generalizing about people who wear glasses are smarter. So it's stereotyping. It's kind of funny though, because just the same thing with New York drivers. You know, one experience. I kind of see where they're making the distinction. So here, it's a more general statement about a group of people, right? People who wear glasses. The hasty generalization about the New York drivers was based on an individual experience. So there's a little bit of distinction that they're making in the quiz there. So that one individual experience is going to be seen as a hasty generalization, where here you're commenting about a group of people. All right. So stereotyping. Yes, people who wear glasses are smarter. Okay. And 24, Christiana. True or false one here?
Okay, so true or false. From the issue at hand. False.
I think it's going to be true. Yeah, so, you know, attacking the character. So a lot of, you know, logical fallacies probably kind of fall into two groups. Either you're just kind of unaware that you're doing it, and you're just kind of ignorant to the idea that you're actually using them, or you're very specifically doing it to distract or change the subject. So that, you know, that's where they're going to be applied, to manipulate the argument to your favor, or just sort of ignorant that you are in fact using it. So yeah, the idea of an ad hominem attack is then going to distract the audience from the issue at hand. So, you know, there's somebody that's telling you that, you know, you should not do this or that, and they're an expert in their field, but then you bring up the fact that they got divorced, right? Completely not part of the argument, but that's going to distract the audience from the main idea that they're presenting. Okay, and I think that's going to be the last one. Sasha Gay, what do we do here?
Logical and I think logical and questions.
So it's probably going to be rhetorical, I think. Let's see here. Yes, you remember we talked a little bit about that. So with your, it falls into that different types of rhetorical techniques. So, you know, the logical fallacies are flawed reasoning. So that's circular logic. You know, the like the video, those are all types of logical fallacies. But rhetorical also, like those appeals by celebrities, right? That's not necessarily a logical fallacy. It's not using bad logic, but it's using bad rhetoric, because you're using the idea that some celebrity endorsement of something is important. Okay, let's see here. So we'll stop that one. And I have one more. Faulty reasoning. Okay, so let's give this one a try. Should be the same format here. And let's see how this goes. All right, Grace. True or false statement here?
Okay. Strong support gives enough evidence to. Strong support gives enough evidence. Strong support gives enough
awkward
to support the claim. True.
Let's see. I think I know what they're going with here. Yeah. So strong support gives enough evidence to support the claim. So if, yeah. Okay. Let's keep going. I want to make sure I hide my answers here. Okay. Christiana. Here we go.
Okay, what is an overgeneralization? Okay, and that's going to appeal to all related to making an inference that is not supported by data. Base conclusion appeal rather than information. The last one, the third one.
Basic conclusions. I think it's going to be the first one. Let's see. Yeah. So general statement that writer applies to all related things. So overgeneralizing, right? That idea, like I mentioned last week, most people have 2 kidneys, right? That is an accurate generalization. Most people, right? That's a fact. Even most people have 2 kidneys. If you're healthy and everything, then you should have 2 kidneys. All people have 2 kidneys. That is an overgeneralization, right? I can't apply that to everybody because there's other circumstances, right? You may have had a birth defect where you're only born with one. You may have had one removed because you had an injury, or you may have had some type of kidney disease, had to have one removed, or cancer. So that's the difference in a accurate, logical generalization and an overgeneralization. So, but that's the difference there. A general statement that the writer tries to apply to all related things. So, and again, looking for those absolute terms, right? Hide those. All right, Sasha Gay, what do we do here?
Based in conclusion on opinions rather than information.
So you're okay. So you're going with the third one?
Yeah.
So that's close, but it's making an inference that is not supported by the data. So that's where you're going to lack reasoning or logic, drawing a conclusion about something that the data does not necessarily show. Okay. And Grace, what about this one?
What is a personal bias? The conclusion based on too little data, making an inference that is not supported by data, making conclusion on opinion rather than information. Personal bias. The last one.
Yeah, and this one's really hard because we're all human, right? And so that's where we kind of, it's hard for us to be objective a lot of the time about things because we have these personal opinions, and things of that nature. So that could be seen as a faulty reasoning if you let personal bias make a decision. Really, this comes into play like we were talking about with our extended responses. You have to kind of work against your personal bias when you read those 2 passages, whatever they may be on, and you may feel one way about it. But does that passage offer a better, or can you write about it in a supportive way? So that's where personal bias might come in. All right. Christiana, let's take a look at this one.
Faulty reasoning. Conclusion based on true data. A reasonable conclusion based on data and evidence. Opinion rather than information. Is it the first one? On the third one.
So a reasonable conclusion is based on
Faulty.
that.
reasoning.
What? Faulty reasoning is a reasonable conclusion is based on data or evidence. No, that is a
Yeah,
wrong.
because when I read that one, I said that one is out. It's either the first one. I
That-
don't know.
Yeah,
Because I mean that
that
one.
is bad. Really, honestly, none of these work that well, but I would say that drawing a conclusion based on too little data could be seen as faulty reasoning. We're gonna pass that one on by because that's not a very good question. Sasha K, give this one a try.
Illogical or overgeneralization.
Let's see here. Overgeneralization, right? So because my 2 rose bushes died, all rose
Everyone.
bushes will die. Yeah, so there's an overgeneralization there. Good job. All right, Grace.
They all seems correct. Logical conclusion. I'll go for A.
Yeah, it
The
should be.
last one. For the last one.
Yeah, it's illogical conclusion, right? So here, right, breaking mirrors causes bad luck. There's no evidence for that. There's no reasoning for that. That's a superstition, right? We know that before, right? Just like a black cat crossing your path, that's a problem for me because I own a black cat. So it's an illogical conclusion. It's like, you don't have evidence to support that. There's no logical reasoning in that. So yeah, that's just a straight up illogical conclusion. Okay, let's keep going here. Christiana, what is this?
Okay. The candidate is so stupid that you know the picture of China. An example of the last one.
Personal bias. Let's see. Yeah. So that could also be seen as an ad hominem attack, right? Canada is so stupid he didn't know the capital of China, but they're, also, language like that, stupid and stuff like that, that could also lend to a personal bias. All right, Sasha Gay, what's this one?
Logical conclusion.
Is that what you're going with?
Okay. Yes, the first one.
Okay. So, think about acting rationally and reasonably, right? Logically. Those are all very similarly defined words. Is someone refusing to ever go in the woods again because they once got a rash seem logical or reasonable or rational to you? So it's another way to look at it, a little more simple way. So yeah, that lacks logic and reason. So that's a really straightforward one. There used to be, I can't remember what it's called now. Here's a great one. So my brother-in-law, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, and he refuses to wear a seatbelt because when my wife and him were younger, they were in a car accident. Their stepbrother was driving, and he took a turn too fast, and they rolled a car, and he flew out the window. And by dumb luck, him actually getting ejected from the car probably saved his life, because a piece of a telephone pole came through the back seat where he had been sitting. Now, I don't know why any fireman or EMT would tell a kid, wow, if you had been wearing your seatbelt, you would have been killed. But they told him that. So from that day forward, he refuses to wear a seatbelt because of this one very specific instance where getting ejected from the vehicle saved his life. So that is definitely an illogical conclusion, that every situation after that, you're going to be safer by not wearing your seatbelt, right? That's an illogical conclusion because of this one very specific incident. So that's how you look at logic and reasoning, sound reasoning. Does this follow through? Does this seem like sound judgment to use? So think about that when you look at your extended responses. All right, and Grace, take a look at that one.
Okay. An experiment is conducted to determine what physical properties identify a metal. One part of the experiment tested the melting point of a substance. An iron nail, a copper penny, and a piece of lead pipe were heated in an oven at 250 degrees Celsius. None of the metals showed any change. The conclusion based on the experimental data is that all metals have a melting point above 250 degrees Celsius. It's an example of a illogical conclusion over generalization. B.
Yeah, it should be an overgeneralization, right? Right. So we tested some iron, some copper, and lead, and none of them melted at 250 degrees Celsius, which is not that high, right? I mean, we cook. 250 Celsius. Yeah, that is pretty high, but still yet, none of the metals melted show any change. So all, right, remember, all, never, ever. If you come across that term, you might be dealing with an over or hasty generalization. All metals have a melting point above 250 degrees. No, we know that's wrong. Mercury is basically liquid at room temperature, right? So that certainly has a melting point well below 250 degrees. Aluminum, I think, probably also has a melting point below that. So overgeneralization. No, maybe not aluminum, but certainly you cannot make that conclusion by simply looking at three separate materials. Okay, and Christiana, what do we do here?
Sending people into space is a waste of money. The space program is an expensive project that allows a few people to look at the Earth from a vantage point that most people would never get to see. We are spending way too much money to let this astronaut play in space. Nothing useful has ever come from human space flight. The government spent as much money on medical research as it spread on space flight. It would help a lot. it the last one?
Personal bias. I should be personal bias. So this in and of itself wouldn't be a bad start to an argument, but it lacks any evidence, right? It's simply stating an opinion here that it's a waste of money. Space program is expensive. We're spending way too much. Astronauts play in space. Nothing useful has ever come from it. All of that is just asserting opinion. So that's personal bias, or it could also just be, say, opinion based. If I was to make an argument here, I could point out, right, you need some statistics or facts. We spend so many $1 billion per year on space program. This same money could be used to do this. It could fund this type of research, or it could feed this many homeless people. Now you're putting an argument together with some facts and some data. So alone, we just have an opinion. So it's just personal bias there. So, if there's some statistics, there's some facts to back that up. Also, they would need to refute the claim, that nothing has ever come from the space flight. Nothing useful has ever come from human space flight. There's been a lot, actually, of technological innovation come about from that. Cordless power tools, or so you would have to show also maybe where not enough has been developed to make it worthwhile. Okay, and keep going. Sasha Gay, how about this one?
Is it the logical conclusion?
It might be overgeneralization. Let's see. Okay, illogical conclusion. I wasn't sure because it's got that language in there. 3 people went to the restaurant, but all are sick. So yeah, 3 friends ate at Spacey's restaurant last night and all are sick today. It's obvious the restaurant served them food with salmonella poisoning. Okay, so illogical. Well, we don't know what they're sick from. They might have colds. He's just saying they're sick. And so it's jumping to a conclusion, right? That's another way to look at it. It's like, well, they all went to the same place. They must have salmonella poisoning. Well, that's very specific. There's lots of different types of food poisoning, for one, but to say that they must have salmonella poisoning, that is certainly illogical. Okay. And let's see, Grace, what are we doing here?
Things were a lot easier for kids before cell phones were invented. For example, there weren't distractions like text messages or phone calls during school hours when kids were learning. They never had to worry if a picture they didn't want it posted, like the time I put on a ton of marshmallows in my mouth, showed up on social media for everyone to see. However, there's curious issue of kids having cell phone and cyberbullying. Kids are having to deal with bullying issues because it is easy to text or send an email through phone and have it delivered to the victim. Parents really need to consider the cons of having a cell phone before they purchase one for their child. For example of the personal bias. Oh.
Should be personal
Overgeneralization.
bias. Let's see. Yeah, so again, that's just a lot of opinion there. Nothing really fact-based. So that's something to look for here. Again, we could think of that as opinion. That's basically what personal bias is. So good job there. All right. And Christiana, what about this one?
Okay. I know. Last night. Wait. I should range all. I should range all. Sure. The first one. The first one.
It might be overgeneralization. Let's see. Yeah. So I like this one movie, so I am going to rent all of his movies, and I am sure that I'll like all of them. Right? That's a hasty generalization to make based on one, movie with Brad Pitt. So overgeneralizing about the nature of someone's work. And Sasha Gay, this.
Faulty reasoning.
Faulty reasoning?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So if it's not closely related to the claim or doesn't support it. So also irrelevant, right? Irrelevant evidence. You could use either terms. Like if you point something out in a passage, it's like, they quoted this statistic, but it's unrelated to, their argument. And you could say that is faulty reasoning, or that is an irrelevant evidence. All right, good job. Grace. What is a claim?
All right, that's message about it. C.
A writer's position on an issue. A writer's message. Oh, come on. Okay. No, we know writer's position on an issue or a problem, right? So that hierarchy there, where we have an argument, and then you have claims to support that argument and evidence to support your claims. So a writer's position on an issue or a problem, right? That's disappointing. So go though. All right, what is support, Christiana?
Okay. Emotional opinion, reasons, evidence that helped. The last one.
Yep. So reasons and evidence that help to prove the claim, right? So you make that claim, you support the claim. The support is found in logical reasoning and evidence. Good job. Well, I'll make sure I didn't give us something crazy. Okay, yeah. All right. Sasha Gay. True or false?
False.
Yeah, it should be false. We need to build a case for something. It's tough for you guys because these passages are small. There's not always a lot to work with here, and you have limited amount of time. Heaping on evidence, the more evidence you can find, the better off you're going to be. You could do that also like I did with our with the passage, or with the response I did last time, where I really focused on the one that I was supporting, and kind of trying to build a better case there. And then at the bottom, sort of pointing out, some of the errors with the other passage. You have to address the two, but you could sort of focus on the one. Okay, and Grace, what we got here?
A personal view or belief based on an emotion or interpretation of facts. Opinion, factual claim, quote, personal view, your personal view or belief.
Opinion.
Yeah, opinion. And we live in a world today where everybody wants, again, we're human. We want people to value our opinion, but we have a problem right now, particularly in this country, where everybody's opinion is not equal. And everybody wants their opinion to be seen as equal, but even opinions need to be somewhat supported. And, there's a lot of craziness out there. And we have these talks about freedom of speech and all this kind of stuff, which is fine. Everybody wants to be able to voice their opinion, but it's just that. It's a personal view or belief. It often is based on emotion or, the way you particularly interpret certain things. And to be unbiased and to be objective, you have to look at as many facts as you can. And just asserting opinion doesn't get anybody anywhere. So not all opinions are equal, whether, a lot of people want to hear that or not. Okay, so good job there. Last one, Christiana.
Okay. What are two important parts that make up an argument? Claim and support.
Claim and support. Yeah. So, and that's what you offer in your thesis statement, right? You make a claim and you're going to assert a few items that you're going to use to support the claim. So, I like such and such because of A, B, and C. And then in the body of your text, you get into details about A, B, and C. Those reasons that the support of your overall claim. So that's it. All right. So good job, guys. I know a couple of those were a little wonky. That second part there was, or that second, what am I trying to say? That second quiz was a little more specific to several items. Let me see here. Can you give me 1 second? There's somebody knocking at the door and it might be maintenance. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Somebody trying to sell me a new electric bill. Some visitors. They were quite insistent on knocking though, so I had to get rid of. So, how do you guys feel about it? Does that help some as far as understanding a little bit more about, faulty reasoning, evidence and claims, and how that all works together?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you guys are doing really well, and some of those are kind of tricky. I wouldn't necessarily get bogged down in details a lot with that. Again, focus on ones that you can easily identify. There might be more than, 2 or 3 in a passage, but you're going to be able to see some. It's like, oh, okay, a bandwagon. Look, there's a claim that, everybody's doing something, so maybe I should do it too. Look for other ones that, are that you can question. And that's why I always come back to with reading and active reading. The whole time that you're reading something, ask yourself about the claims they're making. Ask yourself about the reasoning. Is this sound? And if it's questionable, can I identify, the type of faulty logic and reasoning that they're using, right? So tomorrow we will work again on, we'll use those same examples from the passages that I have from last week, and we'll work on, I think it was like number 3, I think was the next one available that we didn't look at. So we'll try another extended response tomorrow, working on what we did today as far as a little better the claims and evidence that we're looking at, and how we can apply that to, our extended responses, and maybe hopefully kind of speed them up as well. So you guys got any other questions? Is there anything else that we could do that you want some more help with as well?
No.
Okay. Now, I think, Grace, you said you're going to try to take it next week. Is that right?
This week or next week?
Okay. So we will plan on doing the extended response tomorrow. And I mentioned to Grace earlier, I don't know if you guys heard me, I found some other like whole review kind of, tests. And we can go through maybe one of those on Wednesday and maybe one on Thursday to give you a complete refresher on the entire language arts thing. How does that sound?
Good.
Okay. All right. So plan on that tomorrow, extended response. Wednesday and Thursday, we'll do some more general review. Okay.
Okay.
Y'all have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Alright.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.